Okay, welcome to a little demo I'm going to give on drawing. We're going to do a little creative exercise where I actually have included a few different drawings to pick from. You're going to do at least one of the Chevo Cave drawings, either the lions slash panthers, and there's also the rhinos, and as well as there's the horse panel. And we're basically going to do it to scale. What I suggest you do is you print it up 8.5 by 11. If you have a 9 by 12, you're not going to be doing too much larger than that. If you want, you can try to just do it to scale. But we're not going to do any tracing. We're going to actually do this kind of method that involves working with value as well as contrast at the same time. And it's more of a reductive method. And it kind of gets us to pay attention to not just the traditional things of line that normally gives us an understanding of form, but some of the values and textures that are happening from the surface of the rock. And we're going to try to recreate that using vine charcoal, which is what you should have gotten maybe a box of this, because you do go through it pretty quickly. If you just got one of the smaller boxes, it's only like 6 sticks. That should be fine too. But they come in really long sticks, and some of them are thinner than others. Some of them are thicker than others. Sometimes you might even get a lemon, meaning that sometimes it doesn't feel like it's very generous in being able to make a mark. It's not. It seems maybe too hard and not really making a dark mark very easily. You wanted to make sure you got soft or extra soft. Those would be the best ways to work with it. I like the little thicker ones, and I like to kind of break them down in about an inch. It helps me kind of work with them the way that I want to manipulate their marks on the paper. So you're going to want to also have your white eraser, a big one, and you also you can have, this is like a way to sharpen, make points with your vine charcoal or with pastels. We might use that, but there's also other sized erasers that you can get that are kind of fun, make you be able to draw and make marks. Use the eraser as a mark making tool and not just something to correcting your mistakes. So with the first step that we're going to do in this method is a kind of reductive method, which is first lay a ground. I mean, that's kind of similar to how the artists were preparing the surface of the walls by sanding them down and kind of making this really not just smoother surface, but also maybe a consistent, even tone. Some of the white of the rock would kind of, the brighter, cleaner areas of the rock would shine through. And this would actually be a very different texture and color from this, because I've put a grayscale on these images to try to help us work with maybe just worrying about value and not color at all. So with the vine charcoal, break it down to an inch. This is what I'm suggesting here is to get your ground, you just lightly rub that vine charcoal over top of it. And you can see with just the pattern of the fiber of the paper and the inconsistency of my pressure with the vine charcoal and its really generous mark making, I can actually make some really dark marks with this. But right now I'm really just hesitating. I'm applying very little pressure and just letting it rub up against the side of the surface of the paper. Again, I'm just trying to create a smooth ground. Now, some people, when they're establishing a ground, they tend to want to like kind of rub in certain areas, and you can see with the vine charcoal, you can smooth areas out and you can get certain textures. This makes it really inviting to try to get some of these textures that you see in the actual rock, and that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now, and looking at what I'm trying to do is recreate some of that. One thing though is when you do rub it in, it rubs it in a little bit more into the paper. So it's not that with vine charcoal it'll be hard to erase usually ever, but if you rub it in too deep, sometimes it can be a little harder if you really wanted to get an area super white. So I say even in this process of just kind of roughly approximating your composition, it's looking for kind of really loose shapes and forms of value, you can start to see how maybe the images will come into play. And this is, I'm doing all of this before I actually ever establish any line, because once I do this and I try to apply line with a fine charcoal, I'm going to see that it's really easily to get I'm sorry, to erase and manipulate. So once I get kind of a loose ground of what I think I might even get, and I can come back and get certain textures, I'm going to actually kind of go in with my eraser and try to brighten up those areas of the white. But even before I get my lines in there, this is again a way of just trying to see differently than what we normally do. I think when we've been when you're taught to draw, you originally are drawing with a lot of line, and it is a great way to actually access the overall shape and form. But know that any corrections that you need to make, if you don't get your proportions kind of accurate as you're doing what you're doing with this, it won't feel very permanent. With the vine charcoal is, if I go too far, I can actually just come back with more vine charcoal after I've erased a certain area, and it won't look any different. Actually, it'll look almost the exact same, maybe a few ghost marks depending upon how hard I press my charcoal. Now, when you're working with this material, it's dirty and it's going to get all over the place. So I'd say make sure you pick a good place to work with this material. But once you start to establish an understanding, I kind of say go all the way through with the eraser and try to get as much highlights as you see in there that you might have actually covered up with your smearing, and really try to pay attention to where those highlights appear. Often they'll be right up against some of the really dark marks, because that contrast, that's what we notice is that contrast between the light and the darks. And these artists also were very aware of it in the way that they developed the forms and the shadows and the features of the face. So I'm just going to come in and start drawing. I'm left-handed, so I tend to go left to right because I'm going to smear stuff as I go. And if I'm drawing some lines, I want to try to make sure that those aren't the things that I need to start over. So let's see if I can do this with the camera so that you can see what's going on. Now, I'm doing this with the vine charcoal, which, I'm just trying to show you how dark the marks can get. And I think this is just a weird little bit of the rhino right here in this horn. It almost gets super distorted, but I think it's just the way that the contour of the cave wall right there. Now you can see that it's very easy for me to go back and kind of smooth out some of those grays, but I then erase my line. What can be nice is working with charcoal pencil.